Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning into another interview on the Art of Intervention Project Summit, where we're creating resources for individuals, professionals, and families moving from addiction to recovery and living a transformed life. And we're talking about transforming not just lives, but families today with a topic I love to get into. But I'm going to let Deb go ahead and introduce herself over at Franklin Covey, and we'll get started.
Thanks, Rob. So good to be with you today. I'm Deb Hauck, and I'm a full-time consultant with Franklin Covey. And in that role, I do a number of different things. Most of my work is in our government, not-for-profit division. And I do work in developing countries with USAID. I do a little bit of work in education. I do quite a bit of work with different corporations and government entities. And the military is actually what has me doing most of my 7 Habits for Families work. And their chaplains take this very seriously. They certify to be able to provide support for soldiers, marriages, and their families.
Beautiful. And I know you traveled a lot before all the world changed a little bit, so I'm sure that'll lift at some point. It's a new way to do things. But can you give people just kind of an overview of like really what is, because I mean it's a popular name. Most people know 7 Habits. You have 7 Habits for teens and families and all sorts of different lanes you go down. But generally, what would you say the 7 Habits is?
Well, 7 Habits transformed my life, Rob. And I know we have some connection on that. I first read the book when it came out 30 years ago and thought, oh my goodness, this is just a great map for living. I mean, I could immediately see that the benefit for it work, how if we can start to work together well, we're going to get better results. And this inside out approach to how we first have to work with ourselves, manage ourselves, and then build strong relationships with others, it just resonated with me. So I was doing other consulting at that time, talking about the 7 Habits so much. And in 1999, had the opportunity to start to work for this company where 7 Habits at one time was the main thing that I did. I now do other leadership kinds of solutions as well. 7 Habits will always be where my heart is. So this great map for wonderful living, whether you're at work, whether you're with your family, whether you're with your church, your soccer team, how to really maximize creativity, safety to get the best results you can.
We are about to embark in our own family on the 7 Habits of Highly Effective Families this summer. And even though I'm a fan, we haven't done it yet as a family. My kids are 12 and 10, so they kind of get into reading and stuff now too. But thanks for sharing that and the journey, how it affected you directly. We'll probably talk a little more about my journey later in this. And when people look at this, what's kind of a framework they feel like they can come out of if they've gone through the 7 Habits of Highly Effective Families as a family? What could they possibly see happen in their life?
Stephen Covey that wrote the book is where he's been gone for 8 years. And he was so excited about this application to families, as was his wife, Sandra, who just recently passed. She co-wrote the 7 Habits of Highly Effective Families book. And in fact, in a bathroom once, Sandra and I had a conversation. She said, my name's kind of small on the cover of that book. It should be big. I really was a co-author. And I said, Sandra, anytime I talk about families, I'll let people know that. So Sandra Merrill Covey was very instrumental in writing that book as well, taking these principles that Stephen Covey wrote about initially. He was a business professor, applying it to the business world and then saying, okay, how does this apply to our families? Now you can imagine growing up in their family. Their kids were learning this from the time they were itty bitty. And so they had this microscope really looking at how this applies. And what they learned and what they've shared, and all of us get to learn now, is that when we really work on who we are and being at choice, which is what Habit 1 is about, having a vision for where we're headed, getting on the same page as a family with our family vision, learning what to say yes to and what to say no to, what an important conversation it is. And as a family, starting to focus on the most important things. And then learning to think win-win. I mean, so often we have this belief that it's my way or your way. And this idea, if we can really have mutual benefit, how the better results we'll get. How to listen well. I mean, what does that even mean? Most of the time we're thinking about how we want to respond. If someone really needs to be heard, to be able to take a step back and reflect what we're hearing, not just the words, but the feeling. What a powerful thing that is in helping people to feel valued and helping to feel trusted. And then ultimately that we're coming together to create great results in our families. And great results in a family might be we're having the most amazing camping trip. Or when we play games on Friday night after pizza, it is so fun. These are the memories we're going to tell our children, our grandchildren going down. And we are really making memories together. And surrounding everything, Rob, is sharpen the saw. It's how we're continuously growing, learning, developing all parts of ourselves, body, mind, heart, and spirit. And as a family, boy, that's a price we pay to be able to be our best selves. As a parent, am I modeling continuous growth? As a family, are we sharpening the saw together so that we're growing and learning and developing? Now, what Stephen Covey would say if he were sitting here, he'd say, Deb, Rob, I didn't invent the habits. These habits have been around forever because they're based on principles of human effectiveness, things that, we've all known about, the things our grandmothers would have said, well, that's just common sense. But what Stephen said is, yeah, it's common sense, but it's not common practice. And so him developing these habits, sort of detecting them and then articulating them in a way that we can understand is his brilliance. And not that he invented them, but he really made it so that we can digest and live them as a family member, as a friend, as a member of a team at work.
Yeah, he packaged them well. And for those that haven't seen it before, there it is right there. There it is right there. That is awesome.
You get extra credit for having the book.
Thank you so much. I even have notes in the book too, which is completely amazing.
Oh, now it's A++.
There you go. I love that. A++. I'm down with A++. Well, obviously the 7 Habits of Highly Effective Families, changes the direction a lot of people go. And here's one of the takeaways as you were kind of sharing about, family systems is after I went through this myself when I was away, I went out and bought this piece of wood. And it says, "We are the Lohmans." And that became our family motto as a result of going through the 7 Habits of Highly Effective Families. And so there's a lot of purpose in this too. And as we talk about what we in this world of addiction and recovery, could you tie this in maybe a little bit to the totally disjointed families and how they would even try to step into something like this when there's a lot of pain and things going on in the past?
Boy, I'd love to. The consultant in me has just come out, Rob, and I find myself really curious what that motto does. I mean, so often when we think about motto or credo or a mission statement, it's bringing a family together around some intention. This is who we are. And boy, that inspires us, doesn't it? It's like, if we've said this is who we are, then we better give attention to the things that help us to live that. So when you think about the addiction world, and I'll be very humble to say that my knowing about addiction comes from, some close family members that have struggled with that, and a little bit of Al-Anon that I have done, and I've helped to lead one group that was really looking at how the 7 habits might be a template for them and for their families, sort of a map for good living. And boy, that it resonated so much with so many of these. These were primarily younger people that were struggling with all sorts of addictions, alcohol and drug addiction as well. And, so many of those folks talked about the chaos in their families. Many of them grew up not having people model, how we live a life of choice. Many of them grew up with some depression or anxiety, probably some things that hadn't been diagnosed. And this idea of being at choice, that I can make a choice within what we call our circle of influence. And I can learn not to give my attention to things that worry me, that I can't do much about. I mean, you think about that one concept, how that rocks our world. If I can learn, I'm going to water the things that I can do something about, which it's an eye opener for some that my attitude and my mindset, the things I think with awareness, I can actually influence that. I certainly influence what I say, what I put into my mouth, whether I'm exercising every day. I can influence my attitude. We call it learning to carry your weather within. It could be raining outside. I can still have a good day. I can make that choice. Now, do we control other people in our families? Absolutely not. Even when we're parents, we learn pretty quickly. We don't control that baby may cry for a long time. Now, there's things we can do to soothe and feed and change, but we kind of get pretty quickly. They are their own little people when they come into the world. But can we influence? That becomes a question. So we start to look at what is within my influence with other people. And in a family, am I building trust? Am I affirming people's worth and potential? Or am I making withdrawals that, that help to diminish someone's feeling of even wanting to participate in a family, that add to that feeling of overwhelm that so many people experience when they're dealing with things like addiction? It feels out of control. So starting to water the things that we can do something about is huge, whether it's in the addiction world or whether it's any family or individual we're talking about. We all have our challenges. Learning to focus on the things we can do something about is huge for all of us. And that's
Yeah.
habit one, by the way.
Yeah. Well, and so there's so much hope, and it talks about hope and courage throughout the book too, and just being able to press in and move forward and learn these skills because we don't know them. I mean, we know them, but we don't know them because we're so bogged down with the pain and all these things too. But to have like a family identity after coming out of crisis, I mean, what a testimony that people can share. And I'm sure you've seen that in people you've talked to on how their lives have changed, and what an inspiration that must be for you for the work that you do.
Well, it keeps me doing what I do. The opportunity, I have no illusion that it's me that's doing that. I just ask the questions and provide the information, and then to see. I mean, I have such respect for the work that people do, whether they're dealing with addiction, whether they're dealing with a child out of control, whether they're dealing with, boy, I have an extrovert and here I am locked in my home. No matter what their challenges are, it so inspires me when people start to give attention and move forward to the things that really matter most to them. And when they start to bring others into that process, wow, how powerful that is, which is, of course, what we do with families.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite habit?
Well, I will tell you that I think the mission statement is the heart of it. It's the heart of Seven Habits. It's the we are the Lohmans. Who are we? Who do I want to be as an individual, and who are we collectively? And there's not one way to live the habits, but you need to know what's really important to you. So that's the heart of it. And then habit one, you're not going to get onto the train at all. You're not going to be making this journey if we don't see ourselves as having some choice. And we're not holding ourselves accountable for some of those choices. So, those first two habits start it all. I'd have to say the one that I probably work on the most is habit 5. It's so easy for me to, I get passionate about something and I speak when I really should listen. Or, we call it getting carbonated, when you shake up the can and you get carbonated, emotional about that. Those are the times that are hardest for us to, let me take a breath, let me pause, let me think and really make a choice. And I just connected listening with habit 1, and boy, they all are so very connected, but that's probably the one. I'll be working on habit 1, being a choice, and habit 5, the rest of my life. Those are mine that really keep me moving forward and growing. And fortunately, I have family members now that know the habits that keep me honest, particularly my children.
Yeah, well, that distance of I'm going to show this on for the book, because this is like one of the parts I love the most that the 7 Habits teaches. And I remember that specifically when the volunteers came into the prison where I was doing my time after my breakdown, and I remember Ron talked about this freedom to choose your response, stimulus and response, and there's this space in there where you have this freedom to choose it. And I look at the people I work with in addiction and stuff, and so many feel like they've lost that freedom to choose because they're in the survival,
Yes.
reactive, impulsive mode that destroyed my life through gambling and all this stuff that I had. So to sit in that space of a couple seconds of breath,
Yeah.
instead of just being the firecracker, shaked up carbonated can that's going to mess everything up, which I've done on several occasions in my life. But just that freedom to choose response, I think, gives a lot of peace and comfort to a lot of people.
I'm so glad you mentioned the freedom to
Yeah.
choose, because that asking that question is part of what keeps me on my journey, which is, where am I not free? You know? And then to do the work, that self-awareness, the imagination, the conscience, and the independent will, those human gifts we have, to sort of sniff it out where I'm not free, and then to make some better choices. And that's in between what happens to us and what we choose. That's where our freedom is. And so to use that internal conscience, boy, that doesn't feel very free right now. Or there I am blaming so and so for this experience I'm having. All right, let me get in there. How am I thinking about this? What do I want to water? What do I control? I don't want to empower others' weaknesses. I don't want to blame other people. What's the piece I can do something about? And that's where my freedom is. I mean, that self-awareness for me is going to be a lifetime of being able to sniff that out and really learn, what do I want to give my attention to? And boy, the freedom I experience more and more is worth the work.
It's
And it
empowering,
looks
isn't
like
it?
it is for you too.
Well, it's empowering, and to just know when people apply these things, like, it's great to read it, like, it's great material, right? But to read it and not invoke change in your life is even harder, because now you know. And when you apply it and start seeing these little changes, because when I start working with coaching clients, I ask them, do you like to read? And I hate reading. Some people are like that. I was like, okay, well, then audio. I mean, you figure out a way to reach people.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the visuals. I mean, I love one of my favorite videos, which people have probably seen or not seen, I don't know, but it's just the fill in the bucket with your big rocks and little rocks. And it's so cool to learn about priorities. So in talking to families who are watching this now, is figuring out, what are the priorities? Is it to freak out and jump and every time the phone rings and have all this knee-jerk reaction when a loved one's struggling from addiction, or figuring out, how do you empower yourself to not be that reactive parent, loved one, child, or someone with an addiction in the family? I mean, that's empowering too. And I know the 7 habits can help people with that.
Well, you use the terminology of big rocks, the big rocks being the most important things we want to give our attention to. And to get different family members buy-in, I mean, even a little child, a 3-year-old, that can create a mission statement, can find pictures and say, boy, I want my family to be like, this is who I want to be. This is who I want us to be. And then to be a part of a conversation. Okay, this week, what are the big rocks we want to do? Well, of course, we want to have our Friday pizza night and games or movie. What else is important to you this week? How do we make sure that as a family, we're giving attention to those things that are really going to help us to live our mission statement, that we are the Lohmans, or whatever that family is this week? What are our big rocks? And how do we involve all people? It could be one family member has a soccer game and they're going to miss Wednesday night mealtime. Okay, how could we have that big rock? Well, what if we make a special dessert? And when Johnny comes in from the game, we have dessert together so we can celebrate. So getting people really think about, how do we really give attention to some of these things that are so important to our priorities? What are our priorities? I mean, I didn't have that modeled for me. Very few of us have that modeled to me for them, and it can make all the difference in terms of how you live your life. There's one other thing that comes to mind that I want to go back. And if I ever am a broken record, I mean, I think this habit 1 is a big one. It's foundational, because if we're not at choice, it really is hard to live any of the other habits. And I was thinking about the connection between habit 1 and habit 7, which is sharpen the saw. And there is an acronym that has meant so much to me that I'll bet you know, and I'll bet some of your listeners know, which is HALT. When I'm hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, that's not when I'm going to make my best choices. That's not when I'm going to do my best listening. It's not when I'm going to think, okay, what does so and so need as well as what I want, right? So that self-awareness to recognize, it's like if the oxygen mask should come down, put it on yourself first, sharpen your saw, give yourself that oxygen before you can be your best self for others. So HALT has been one of those great acronyms that I can think about and go, "Ooh, I think I won't send that email right now." You know, I think I'm gonna sleep on that one. I think I'm gonna have a snack before I ask my husband why he did that.
Yes.
Or before I give my children some feedback. I think I'm gonna lay down and take a nap or have something to eat or really think about what is it I really want to come out of that conversation. Take a deep breath, you said. So HALT being an acronym for, am I really my best self right now? And what do I need to do so that I can show up in the way I want to show up with people in my family? I mean, it's a huge one, isn't it?
It is, especially with the way our world's been kind of turned upside down the last several months too. It's just like all these, chaos and pandemics and this and that, and so many things to pull us that can get us off of that center beam where we can be just totally distracted and busy and not focused on really what is really important.
And when you think about that, I'm going to go back to the circle of influence, Rob, because so many things have been going on in our life, with race relations and COVID and just so much that can feel so much in our circle of concern. To really think, what are the one or two big rocks that I can give my attention to? Well, I can learn more about my white privilege. I can learn more about these things. That's something I can do. That starts to bring it within my circle of influence. I can fund things that are important, people that are doing good work in social justice. In COVID, I can keep up with, what the recommendations are, what's going on in my area, how I build my immune system. So for families to begin to come together when there's so many things that are overwhelming, not to go to a place of, in the psychological literature, it's that low locus of control where we feel like we're so overwhelmed by all that, there's nothing we can do. What do we as a family want to do? What do we want to give our attention to? Maybe we don't look at the news right before we go to bed because it disrupts our sleep. But maybe we have a current events discussion at a time when we're feeling well resourced so that we're all learning and developing. But it doesn't become something that every time a headline comes up, I'm giving my attention to it, which I notice just makes me more anxious. Circle of concern. So I think it's developing the discernment, what to give our attention to, and we certainly can model this for our children. We can talk about as a couple how we want to do this. And by the way we define family is anybody you say is your family. It's not necessarily your biological family. It's the people that matter most to you. Are we really supporting each other in living a life of choice, possibility, your words, finding that freedom?
Which is, as you mentioned, I think of like a company too, and the company defines their mission statement and what their family is in a company as well. And because I know Franklin Covey does a lot of, I mean, it's a very large corporation that does a lot of great things out there. So could you give people just maybe a snapshot overview of like the different lanes that Franklin Covey plays in?
Well, I'd be happy to. And most of my work is in leadership. So I'll work with big organizations and we'll look at how Seven Habits is often a part of that. We have many leadership solutions. So we look at how people come together collectively to get results. I mean, as leaders, we have to get results. And how this principle-based way we manage ourselves, build strong relationships, have systems and processes that make it easy for people to do the right thing. How we really develop these strong organizations that are getting results in a way that they'll continue to get. They're building the capacity to get even better results in the future, which means we're principle-based. We do have a mission. We are working on developing trust and the capacity of our teams to be creative and get the best decision making and best results. So most of what we do is working with, we're in 80% of Fortune 500 companies, and we're in most government agencies, we're in the military. So that's most of what we do, helping groups to get results. this piece on families. I'm just so happy I get to do that too, families and marriages, to do that. And that's primarily, we do that in our education division, and we do it in our military division.
Lot of stress can be in those situations for sure, and trying to figure out how to stay unified through those hard times is awesome. So I'm a huge fan of Franklin Covey. I'm so glad Jeff connected me with you to be able to talk today, and it's a blessing for me to be able to share this with our audience, and such a valuable thing. So if people wanted to, say, get started with some 7 Habits materials and things like that, what is the best way for them to kind of learn what you guys do and where to go?
Well, let's talk about what your learning modality is. You mentioned some people don't love to read. I love the audio version of 7 Habits, and I would listen to it over and over, and I would say, now, did he say that before? Because I'm hearing it in a whole new way. So audio is a great way to learn. Stephen's son, Sean, wrote The 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teens. And I know more adults that like it's 7 Habits Light. It makes it simple, digestible. It's a good read too. It uses a lot of sports analogies and analogies that teenagers would like, but I find adults enjoy it too. If you're a reader, oh my goodness, the 7 Habits book you will read over and over, and it has so much depth in that, and it's wonderful. You can get on our website, and there's a number of things you can see. There are recordings like Leading in Turbulent Times is wonderful with several of our thought leaders. So franklincovey.com is a great way to see all the things that we have and the ways that we support people, whether you're talking about an individual, whether you're talking about a family, whether you're talking about a corporation. And we've put our solutions addressing all different types of learners. So get on there and see what all we have.
For sure, everybody. Well, thank you for your time. Is there anything you want to kind of say as you lead us out of our conversation today?
Well, it excites me so much that that we're learning to apply 7 Habits in so many different ways. I think it's just a great cognitive map, whether you're in the addiction world or whether you're in any world. And I'm happy to hear about what it's given you, Rob, what it's given you, your family. That's just very encouraging to me. And it's just wonderful to get to talk with you today. Thank you.
You got it. Have an amazing day. We'll talk to you soon.
You too. Bye-bye.